On Monday, the Trump administration announced an executive order restoring all previous United Nations sanctions on Iran and imposing new sanctions on the Islamic Republic. These sanctions are set to establish an indefinite arms embargo on Iran to replace the previous embargo, which is set to expire in October. The previous arms embargo was created under the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, or JCPOA. According to a statement by President Trump, the executive order is aimed to greatly diminish the Iranian regime's capacity to export arms to terrorists and dangerous actors throughout the region, as well as diminish its ability to acquire weapons to build its own forces. President Trump continued, "The United States will not allow the Iranian regime to further advance capabilities to directly threaten and terrorize the rest of the world. My administration will use every tool at our disposal to stop Iran's nuclear, ballistic missile, and conventional weapons pursuits." These new sanctions have been imposed on 27 entities and individuals who have done business with Iran in the past, including Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. In addition to the unveiling of these sanctions, the United States has issued a threat to the members of the United Nations who are in opposition to this executive order. During a news conference, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo asserted, "The United States expects all UN member states to fully comply with their obligations to implement these measures." He continued, "If UN member states fail to fulfill their obligations to implement these sanctions, the United States is prepared to use our domestic authorities to impose consequences for those failures and ensure that Iran does not reap the benefits of UN prohibited activity." Mr. Pompeo has characterized Iran as a radical revolutionary and the world's leading state sponsor of terrorism and anti-Semitism. This move, however, has left the United States largely isolated from its allies. European leaders have warned the U.S. that it has absolutely no authority to reimpose UN-mandated sanctions on Iran. In a joint statement, France, Germany, and Italy, under the name E3, said, "The United States of America ceased to be a participant in the JCPOA following their withdrawal from the agreement on the 8th of May, 2018. Consequently, the notification received from the United States and transmitted to the member states of the UN Security Council has no legal effect. It follows that any decision or action which would be taken on the basis of this procedure or its outcome have no legal effect." In addition to the E3, China's permanent UN representative Zhang Zhun has expressed opposition to the new sanctions. Mr. Zhang expressed opposition in a letter to the President of the Security Council and the UN Secretary General. In his letter, Mr. Zhun pointed out that the United States unilaterally withdrew from the JCPOA, and therefore it is illegitimate for the United States to demand the Security Council to invoke the snapback mechanism. 13 members of the Security Council earlier wrote to the President of the Council and clearly stated that any decision or action resulting from the U.S. letter is devoid of any legal, political, or practical effect. It's important to note that this wildly unwarranted and unwanted sanction comes after the Abraham Accords peace agreement between Israel and the United Arab Emirates. The peace agreement was signed to effect the normalization of relations between the two nations, thus making the UAE the third Arab country to make peace with Israel. According to President Netanyahu of Israel, the accords are hoped to effect a peace that will expand into other Arab states to end Arab-Israeli conflict once and for all. However, as Israel is a frequent human rights violator, this news warrants the question, peace on whose terms? Can peace exist where there is gross injustice? Is there any correlation between the Abraham Accords and the Iranian sanctions? Are these moves a precursor to war? We'll be sure to follow up these stories as they develop over time. Tune in to Verified every week for critical news updates. I'm Nail Ali, and this is Verified.